take my scripture from Luke, the 15th chapter, the 24th verse, and it says, "For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found," and they began to be merry. I want to talk to you briefly from the subject, they counted you out, but God still counted you in. At this point, we just heard preached so eloquently by the preachers a story of a young man who took half of his father's living and went far off into another country, and it says in the Bible that he wasted his substance with riotous living. And so as I was studying, I came to the conclusion that this son had gathered his inheritance, and then he made a choice to choose pleasure over purpose. And so now when we look at the story, we see a son who is now operating outside his father's will. This became a problem to me because at this point when I was studying the text, I shifted from studying to kind of in a place of judgment of this prodigal son. Because I could not understand how somebody who stood in line for such a great inheritance could make a choice like he made. And so God had to then begin to deal with me. And so he took me to Romans, the 8th chapter, verse number 16 and verse number 17. And it says, "The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God." Verse 17 said, "And if children, then heirs. Heirs to God and joint heirs with Christ." I began to say, okay, God, what is it that you're trying to show me? He said, in order to truly exhaust the text, because you're in a place of judgment, I have to now show you you. I said, okay, God, then what is it about me, God, that I do not understand? He said, what you have to understand, Maurice, is that after you became a child of God, after you came into the knowledge of your inheritance, at one point or another in your walk, you too chose pleasure over purpose. He said, Maurice, you too found yourself at times operating outside of your Father's will. But what you have to understand about operating outside the will of the Father is the enemy, who we all know to be an accuser of the brethren, will then begin to try to build a wall around your mind using bricks of fear, doubt, and condemnation. And so now what he'll do is he'll take your mistake and begin to tell you that you can never bounce back from the mistake that you made. He'll begin to tell you that God can never restore you back to what you were supposed to be. He'll begin to tell you that they've counted you out. There's nothing that can be done. This mistake has cost you everything. So then when we look back at the text, we see that the Bible said that this prodigal son came to himself. And naturally at this point, you would get excited that he's finally came to himself and he's headed back home. But as I was looking closer at the text, I began to see that yes, he came to himself, but he came to himself with a mindset of a distorted perception of who he really was. You see, because now this mindset had been developed in the pig pen. And so even though he was headed back to his father's house, he was now going back to be a servant when he was ordained to be a son. And sometimes for us, beloved, we make decisions and operate outside the will of God. And when we finally come to ourselves and we're ready to get back up and get back in the race, we come back, but we operate, function, and live beneath our privileges. I said, God, what do you want me to tell your people? He said, Jeremiah 1 and 5 says that before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. I said, God, then what are you saying? He said, tell them before the foundation of the world, every mistake that you would ever make, every mistake that you made now, and every future mistake I already knew. And even though they counted you out, I still counted you in. He said, tell them every bad decision, every failure, every shortcoming, I knew before the foundation of the world. And even though they were counting you out, I was still counting you in. He said, get up out of that pig pen, dust yourself off, and head back to your father's house. Because like they just told us, there's a ring waiting on you. There's a robe waiting on you. There's some shoes waiting on you. There's a party waiting on you. Because even though they counted you out, I still counted you in. They counted you out, I still counted you in. They wrote you off, but I still count